to a very kind of harsh tonal change, Matt, because unfortunately some bad news with the German fan scene, and I think probably, well, depends. I mean, we obviously have listeners from around the world, a lot of them in the US, where maybe they didn't pick up on this, but Schalke were playing in Ireland this weekend, and I'm just trying to remember who they were playing. Was it Bohemians?
Bohemians, yeah. It took me by surprise as well. It was completely not on my radar that Schalke had organised some international friendlies.
Yeah, I didn't know Schalke had. I knew Gladbach had, because the live score app that I use, I have like notifications on for all the German teams, or the Bundesliga teams, and it does it as well for friendlies. So while I was away this weekend, I was getting notified of Gladbach scoring in their pointless friendly with somebody. So I know a lot of clubs are obviously using the international break for that. But unfortunately, there was some sad news ahead of their game against League of Ireland side Bohemians in Dublin. So I'll just quickly give the context here, the quick brief stuff that people might have saw. Before the match, there were 2,000 supporters from Schalke doing what most fan groups do, Matt, on away days, where they kind of conglomerate, they congregate, and they walk to the stadium. They march, if you will, to the stadium, and they were marching through Dublin. And there's an unfortunate scene where they were walking through Dublin, and a photographer, I don't know if she was a photographer or just a tourist who had a camera or whatever, but she was standing in front of them as they marched down the road, taking photos. A guy marched up to her, kind of tried to pull the camera away from her. Her friend, who's an older gentleman, tried to stop him. He gets knocked over. And then the video stops there, but there's been a lot of reporting, obviously, on what happened. The BBC covered this. It was obviously covered in Germany as well. As you reported yourself, some kind of serious injuries to the gentleman on the floor. And, not, I mean, obviously a sign of violence, but obviously not a trivial one by any means. Someone getting kicked in the head in broad daylight in the middle of the middle of the street is never okay. And it's led to this kind of, I don't know if I'd call it international news, maybe international news for football fans, because it obviously is something that I saw it trending on Reddit, on the soccer forum. The BBC covered it. It's obviously a big story in Germany as well. I'm sure people around Europe have picked up on it. But I think we have to kind of maybe provide some context to here, Matt, as you've done in your newsletter, not to try and justify by any means, quite the opposite, but there's a few kind of factors that I think we have to talk about. Maybe starting with the fact that what struck me in that video was that there's no police at all, as far as I can tell. Now, I did do a bit of digging, and there were Bohemian fans and League of Ireland fans saying that, living in Dublin, that there was a group of Irish police behind the Schalke fans. So they were ushering them to the stadium, but none in front, none either side, which is what you typically do see when foreign fans do go abroad. And in many cases, they're quite unfairly treated. They are literally kind of like penned in, sometimes with horses and things like that as well. So it could be quite intimidating. But in this case, because it was a friendly match on an international week, you can see that Irish police just didn't obviously give it much due diligence. But I think that was partly the problem as well, Matt. And there's just a lot going on, isn't there, which is maybe worth you kind of joining the dots together if you can.
Yeah, there is a lot to it. And I think there's a series of events, which basically a series of, I suppose, attitudes, events, developments, which have then led to this really, really shocking incident, really, and it is shocking. First thing to say is that, yeah, like you said, 2,000 Schalke fans going to Dublin. This was a big trip for them. It was actually Schalke's first European away game, even if it was a friendly, their first European away game since that 7-0 defeat away to Manchester City in the Champions League under Domenico Tedesco. I think it was 10-2 on aggregate, that game. Obviously, since then, Schalke have ended up in who would have thought it? Schalke Champions League. I saw Schalke in a Champions League semi-final once, which is a different world. But so obviously this was a popular trip. They've actually organised 2 trips to go into. I think they've also played FC 20 in Holland as well. So yeah, 2,000 Schalke fans have gone to Dublin to play the teams playing Bohemians FC, and like you said, like many sort of German or European fan groups do, they congregated in the centre of the city, and to march together to the stadium, led by the main ultra group at Schalke, the Ultras Gelsenkirchen, one of the biggest ultra groups in German football, at one of Germany's biggest clubs. The police escort is one element to it. I think a bigger issue regarding the police, not necessarily escort or no escort. I think, like you said, it's not necessarily. I wouldn't necessarily think it's necessary to have police sort of lining and escorting these fans. But there was a suggestion mentioned in the local German media over here that the German police had actually offered assistance to the Irish police, not regarding an escort of sorts, but regarding the fact that certain stadium bans issued to certain Schalke fans, which would have validity in Germany, were not valid for a friendly abroad, and that therefore, at least according to this report in German media, that up to 300 or 400 Schalke fans who would be considered potentially violent, potentially at risk, some of them apparently on stadium bans in Germany, had travelled to this game. So you had that situation where it perhaps wasn't quite the normal Schalke crowd, and potentially a slightly more problematic Schalke crowd. Again, that's not to tar all 2,000 Schalke fans with the same brush, and certainly not to tar the rest of Schalke's huge support with that brush. But the consequence partly of that has been seen on this video, which has been doing the rounds. And I think when I reported it, it had already amassed over 7 million views on X, and you saw it on Reddit, it got on the BBC. So this did do the round, and as you said, you can see the Schalke fans marching down the street as they do, singing various songs. And there is on this footage, you see a lady who, I believe her name is Carly Clark. I believe she is a photographer, taking photos, full front-on photos of the Schalke ultras marching towards her. Now, this is in no way to defend what happens next, not at all. But yeah, it should be said that a lot of ultras certainly don't like being filmed. They don't like having cameras stuck in their face. The ultras will often approach people waving cameras around, and not violently, but say, put your camera away, just leave it, don't put your camera in my face. This photographer clearly doesn't know that. She didn't know who they were. She thought it was some sort of parade. However, whether she understood the rules of this German football subculture or not is completely irrelevant, given what happened next. And like you said, well, one of the ultras tries to push her phone fairly violently, or her camera, or whatever it was, out of her hand. And when another colleague of hers, I believe it's a colleague, comes in to sort of assist her, another ultra comes and pushes him from behind and shoves him onto the floor. And then while he's on his knees on the floor, a third Schalke ultra appears to aim a kick at his head. It's at that precise point that the film actually cuts out. So it's pretty shocking. Now, by all accounts, fortunately, the man was only lightly injured. Apparently, he didn't have to go to hospital. But it's shocking, and it's thuggish, and it's not a good look. And I think beyond the thuggish act and the potential for serious injury that they've caused, and the illegality of it, it's beyond that. I think there's also a massive disservice which they've done there to German football fans, to German ultras, to German ultra culture, fan culture as a whole. It's the sort of thing that I write about every single week, and it's something that we celebrate in Germany, in German football. We've just talked earlier about the positive message that Werder Bremen's ultras there were sending. We highlight the massive choreographies. We highlight the anti-racism work. We highlight the work that German ultras do in holding their clubs to account, in combating some of the more extreme commercial elements of the game. Several occasions we've highlighted the same Schalke ultra group, the Ultras Gelsenkirchen, like one of the biggest groups in Germany, for some of the responsible for some of the most spectacular choreographies and displays and atmospheres in Germany. I've also pointed out on the on the piece that they do an awful lot of good charitable work as well. Just in January, they handed over an annual charity check to a specific charity organisation. This year, it was €16,000 to an organisation to purchase sports gear and sports clothing for disadvantaged kids. I say disadvantaged in a city like Gelsenkirchen, which is one of, if not the poorest cities in Germany. So these groups, and this group in particular, the Ultras Gelsenkirchen, stand for an awful lot of good things in German football. However, when you see the footage that we saw there from Dublin, it's evident that there's clearly an element to them which is not quite as positive. And yeah, it's Schalke themselves as the club have obviously condemned it. They put a big statement saying it's not on. Personally, I'd like to see some sort of responsibility taken by the Ultras Gelsenkirchen themselves. They're a big group. They're a big organised group, and the group is not run by idiots. However, this particular incident in Dublin has cast them, and I think probably all German ultras in a negative light.
Yeah, without a doubt, it's a PR disaster, really, and you're right. I mean, the thing that still just kind of stands out to me is the kind of organisation around this moment. Like I said, there's no police presence as far as I can tell. I mean, maybe there is, but it's minimal. And yeah, you can absolutely argue about the need for police to monitor football fans at certain games and certain atmospheres. You can definitely make a very strong argument that they're over-policed and more often than not, but I feel like there was just a lot of there wasn't really much joined-up thinking between the two clubs in this regard. I think Bohemians maybe agreed to a friendly with Schalke because they thought, it's a German club, it'll be interesting for our fans, let this do it, or maybe Schalke arranged it, said let's go to Ireland, blah, blah, blah. I don't think anyone at Bohemians ever thought this is like the second or third biggest club in Germany coming to town who haven't been abroad, as you said, since they played, Man City. What did you say? It was 2011 it was?
No, 2019.
19, sorry. Okay, but still good, 6 years ago. It's a fan group that is just desperate and craving for an international away day, even if that means it's a friendly.
But they're all technically positive ingredients.
I know, but I guess, no, absolutely, yeah, absolutely. But the point I'm making is that I think I'd love to know we never will, but I'd love to know the conversations between Bohemians and Schalke, because I think there's an onus on Schalke to say to Bohemians, hey, look, we've got a very passionate fan group who will come over in their hundreds of thousands to come to watch this game. It's worth saying to local authorities so you guys can be on top of this, which doesn't seem to have been the case, or if it was, it fell on deaf ears. And the other aspect, as you've reported in your newsletter, because it's a friendly match where tickets presumably are just free for anyone to buy and anyone can kind of show up on the day, even as opposed to like a European away game where presumably for most clubs, away tickets for European games are quite heavily monitored because it's usually season ticket holders or people who are on, ticket schemes and things like that. So people that the club are aware of who go to games, who are on their database, etc., i.e. not known hooligans who are banned from home matches can get into these games. But obviously with a friendly match, they can't. Now, obviously there are hooligans at other football clubs and there are hooligans at other football clubs who do stuff like this, but it felt like a perfect storm where you wouldn't get a club that's the size of Schalke playing a mid-season friendly away from home and being in a circumstance that they're in where fans want to go to the game abroad because they want a away day, but also their hooligans want to go to a game because like if I'm trying to think, this strongly compares to Dortmund because as you wrote in your article, there was a kind of, you wrote a few weeks ago, there was an alleged arranged fight between the two clubs, as you wrote 2 weeks ago in your newsletter. If Dortmund were playing Bohemians, there wouldn't really be any urge for their hooligans to go to that match because there's not really a need for Dortmund fans to go to an away game in Ireland because they go to away games all the time in Champions League. Now maybe the hooligans would show up because maybe that's because they realise there's a loophole there in terms of ticketing and stuff like that. But it just felt to me like it was a situation where it was just like the perfect storm. No one was paying attention. The ultras could take advantage of the situation. Maybe there was a lack of attention paid by the clubs and, the police services on both sides. But as you said, perhaps the German police did make an effort to try and reach out to their Irish counterparts. And it just led to this situation where these hooligans could take advantage of the situation.
Yeah, no, it's a shame. And the ironic thing is that, Schalke's ultras and other ultra groups, they'll be the first to complain the next time that the policing is over the top. And it often is. And they'll be the first to complain. And in 99% of cases, I'd say, yeah, you're right. The policing is over the top. It's unnecessary. However, you sort of lose the argument, or you don't really have a leg to stand on when the police then turn around and say, well, without this, one of your members kicked a guy in the head. So, yeah, basically done an unfortunate disservice to everyone. And yeah, like we said, fortunately, the fella in question wasn't seriously injured by all accounts. So it's a shame. And Schalke and the Ultras Girls Incursion are better than that.
Yeah, that's a good way of wrapping it up.